Today, we're discussing all things wide receivers, ranging from strategy questions, tier risers, tier fallers, and most importantly of all, trades, and more trades. Stick around for all that and more. And welcome into the Dyno Construction Podcast. Justin joined with David and JP here, part of our positional update series that we've been hopping into. We've already hit RBs, already hit quarterbacks, and now we're to the position that we value the most at this point, I would say, or close to it. At the very least, it's the most liquid position. So we're going to start this conversation as we have the last couple episodes, looking at this graphic David's put together about Startup 80. So David, walk us through a little bit about what you put together here on the screen. Walk the people through kind of how to construe this, as well as what you've taken away from this.
Yeah, so if you've been paying attention, hopefully you understand what's going on here. But if you haven't seen any of the previous videos, just real quick, this is just looking at the top 12 wide receivers drafted in 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26. Looking at average ADP from May 1st to May 30th, 31st, the end of May, whichever day that is. And just in the order of years is the same order of colors of the rainbow. So red is the furthest year back, which in this graph actually is the most interesting year. It had the highest number, so lowest drafted wide receivers compared to the other years. These other years are very similar. I think it's probably the least interesting of the charts so far, and I'm kind of not surprised. We have learned many years ago that we really like receivers, and building through them, which is something we're going to talk about soon, is a very good strategy in most scoring formats. The other thing I'll say is if you look at 26, it's starting to fall back. I think maybe that's more of an age thing, also combined with we're starting to draft running backs a little bit earlier. We've got a couple tight ends being drafted up high. So I don't expect to continue towards 2022. Again, I think we're going to stay right in this very close band that we've seen from 2023 to 2026. And I kind of just expect that to stay the same.
What I'm seeing here is that we are acknowledging the fact that we have the top 3 or 4 dynasty wide receivers, especially the top 3. They're all hammers and they're all young, so people love them. And with just the fall of quarterback, I think that's the result we're seeing here from the wide receiver position. That's really where it's taking from, because running back is up, wide receiver is up, especially at the top end. But then quarterback is down. That's the position that's losing out. So I'm comfortable still taking those top 4 or 5 wide receivers. I think the edge is a little bit lost from what it used to be, because if you had those hammer young wide receivers, they were more so the 1-2 turn, which now it's early second, early first to mid first. So I find myself shopping in that range of 9 to 15 because I want those wide receivers that could shoot up into this range because of how much value they really do have. But otherwise, that's all the takeaways I have. What do you got, Justin?
I think David hit the nail on the head with this one doesn't seem to have a stark pattern that I'm seeing. I do think that the wide receivers 8 through 12 kind of in like the ADP that we see increasing there from last year, I do think has a little bit to do with age, just in a lot of the wide receivers in that range, right? Garrett Wilson getting to be a year older, right? These players, and even at the beginning of the curve, I think we see like the very high end one right there. It just dictates and shows we feel very sure about the first few, like JP said, but then after that, there's a lot of who's the next guy, and I think it's pick your flavor. I think you see those guys going in a different order, right? Like you might see T-Mac going very early, Drake London going above Jettas and some. So I really think we're going to see more certainty probably in the next couple of years. And I think it'll, instead of trending up, like David said, it will end up trending back down a little bit as a few people age out. But next year's wide receiver class and this year's wide receiver class, I think will drag the line down as age is working to drag it up from the veterans that are already in the league and established. So now that we talked through this little startup strategy bit, we're going to go into a handful of roster construction strategy questions. So we always talk about building through your wide receiver room. JP, why is that?
Yeah, I want to look deeper into the studies of this, but just from what we feel, you guys speak for yourself too, but we just think that wide receivers, they have better longevity compared to other positions like running backs. And also, when you get those stud wide receivers, they're consistent and they have a high ceiling, but a lot of times you see when those wide receivers like 2 and 3s, that they're just so volatile. So I think having those elite wide receivers is just very valuable because you don't get a lot of consistent wide receivers. And if I can get a young stud, I feel pretty confident that they're going to give me production for 6, 7 years, where I think running back value kind of spikes from year to year. So I just really like to build through wide receivers. I've always been that way. I think part of it too is when you see a backup running back enter in the position of a hurt starter, they're usually good scorers, but the same thing does not apply a wide receiver. So you have to have those really good wide receivers because targets and volume are earned at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head for me there. It's about volume for the position. Longevity is an important part of it as well. But there's very few wide receivers that just demand the volume that is difference making, that's consistent, that's going to help you win your leagues. Now, these days, the amount of running backs that are true difference makers is dwindling, but it's a lot easier to replace the volume of an injured running back or to predict when this guy is going to be startable, that guy's going to be startable at running back. So you really want to have confidence in the receivers you're starting. You don't want to have to think about it. And on top of that, everybody wants wide receivers. Everybody always likes good young wide receivers. Other than draft picks, they're the most tradable asset in almost every league. So just a combination of all these things we're talking about, Justin. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, but that's why we like building here through our wide receivers for sure.
Yeah, you guys really talked a lot about the position, the production, all that. The only thing I would add is the flexibility. I personally have always found that wide receiver, young wide receivers especially, is the next best thing to a pick in terms of every team wants that thing. I'd rather have a 27 first than a wide receiver worth a 27 first if I'm going shopping for something else. But most leagues, you need to start 3 wide receivers and you have a couple flex spots, right? Versus teams only need 2 quarterbacks and teams only need 1 tight end. And there's just not as many running backs, I think, hold the same value, to be honest. So at the end of the day, it's just the flexibility is the only thing I would add to that and the desirability of it as a position. So how do we decide how many startable wide receivers you want on your roster, on your team? It's an important question. David, I see you're chomping at the bit here.
I figured I'd jump in here. The first thing you need to do is know your scoring settings. Are wide receivers actually the position you want to be starting in your flex spots? Assuming they're definitely startable in your flex spots, I want enough wide receivers to start my wide receiver in my flex spot. Maybe one more or two on the bench, depending on how deep my bench is. But I want all them to be startable, and then I don't really want receivers that I don't feel confident starting. Maybe one or two that I feel have really high upside and I can burn a bench spot, but I'm not expecting them to contribute. So I don't want a ton of wide receivers, but all the wide receivers, I want them to be quality.
Yeah, I think this is something that you guys would even recognize that I struggle a little bit with at times because I do like wide receivers, especially the young guys with the upside. But I think in a start 11, if you got 3 wide receiver spots, 3 flex, I like to have 2 of my flexes be wide receiver if I got a good team. So I got these wide receivers I think can earn volume and they can ascend potentially even higher. But then I probably want 2 guys after that that I can plug in, and ideally just to plug in the rest of the bench spots with running backs, quarterbacks, even some tight ends. So I think about 7 or so if I had to give a number right now, but I think it's going to vary from league to league for sure.
I view it as like number of starters at the wide receiver position plus 2 is roughly what I'm looking for. So same thing you kind of said there. It's going to be interesting when we get to a later question. We kind of talk about how many we want to hold in addition to those startable wide receivers. Next question we have here, though. How do you handle elite wide receivers, CD, Jettas, who might be talking to you guys, who are in the back half of their prime? And I'm just going to start off with this one here real quick. What I've done in our actual podcast league, our listener league, I had CD and I traded CD and Dak for something along the lines of Bo Nix and JSN last offseason. In the season, I traded Jettas because I saw that clip coming of value. I still think he's going to be phenomenal for T-Mac and Travion Henderson, who I then flipped into a 27 first that I think's kind of random. I love to try to go for the ascending potential asset plus like a first-ish in value. When these guys are going to that second round, go for a guy who's in the third round and pick up a first if you still can. Try to get out ahead of it. It's risky, to do it, but when you hit on, that's how you can stay forever. And that's why I love to make sure I'm picking up that just in case I'm wrong first to value. So I don't mind the trade if that guy stays where he is more or less.
The names here to call out would be Justin Jefferson and CD Lamb because they're both already 27 years old as of this recording. Amon-Ra's close. He's getting close. But the thing is, on Keep Trade Cut, Jefferson's wide receiver 5, CD Lamb's wide receiver 7. Now, we say for that tier, it's close to 3 firsts that we like for those wide receivers if we're going to sell them. And if you can get that for those guys, I think long term, it's probably better because in order for them to maintain that value at 27 years old, next season being 28, I think they have to produce top 4 or 5 wide receivers to maintain that value. And if they're wide receiver 7 or lower, they're probably going to tick down a little bit. And if they have like Justin Jefferson, just if he had another season like he just did, he could fall down to worth, I don't know, 2 firsts, lose first in value, maybe even a touch more. And also, what you have to start considering at this age also is if they suffer some sort of major injury, there's a chance to never come back. Just look at Michael Thomas, Julio Jones. I remember even Des Bryant fell off at one point. I don't know if it was injury related for him specifically, but if they have something like that, there's a lot more risk because if they don't come back right, like sometimes those guys' careers are over when they're going to be entering 28 years old. So there's at least something you have to start thinking about. But if you're trying to compete, it's really hard to move off these guys because they're probably going to be awesome.
Yeah, that was the direction I wanted to talk about it from because you guys are right. If you can get out while they're still top 6 wide receiver in value, get a nice young piece, Tet McMillan or something, and pick up a first, that's the right process, right? That's smart to do. I get it. But I don't think Tet's going to score 22 points a game next year. I do think Jefferson could do that. I do think CD could do that. I don't know if Tet's ever going to do that in the situation he's in. If my championship window is now, it's really hard to pull that trigger, if I'm being honest. I still think Tet and above, I'm probably doing it. Of course, above, because above him is like Drake London and then probably Justin Jefferson. So certainly that. But if we're talking one of the rookies this year or Olave or like Buka, those kind of guys, I don't know if I can go that far for that. And even at Ted, it's difficult because I just like to score points if I'm trying to win a championship.
What do you think about this? Which, David, this does have, some parallels to our trade, but what if you can trade that wide receiver for Marion Hampton or Brock Bowers or Trey McBride, right? And you eliminate some of that risk, but you still maintain a high ceiling points wise. Justin, what do you think? Do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, I would love to switch over to something that I think has more sticking power value wise. I think that's a potentially even less risky way to approach it. But it's if I'm contending, that's the way I want to go. If I am in more of a retool rebuild year where if I can still contend because Tet hits it off, I'm ecstatic. Then I love to go the Tet plus the first way. But I think David hit the nail on the head, and I think you offered a good solution if you are contending and want to worry about the age. Next question we have, how do you define a roster clogger and what do you do with that? So I think there's a couple big questions here, right? How do we define that roster clogger? Pretty
Right.
self-explanatory. They clog up your rosters. David, what is your threshold for that? How do you kind of define that though?
Like every league's different, every market's different. For me, basically, if I'm not comfortable starting him, he's a roster clogger. Now, sometimes you need the stress of the season to realize that you're not comfortable starting like Xavier Worthy or whoever in that range, Jaden Higgins. I know some of these names, people are like, oh, they still have upside. Look, a couple of them might hit occasionally. You're right. Some of them might. I'd rather do things with my roster spots that are different. I'd rather look for points elsewhere. I'd rather look for value elsewhere. So basically, for me, if I'm not comfortable starting the player, then they're a roster clogger. And if you're a roster clogger without any upside, I got to find a way to get you off my bench. If I can get value, awesome. Any sort of pick. But I'm cutting guys like receivers that most people don't want to cut, and I'm picking up backup running backs because that's just how I'd rather have my bench set up.
Yeah, and of course it's very league dependent. If you play like in our listener league, there's not really any notable running backs to pick up. And I think in some leagues like that, you might want to take a shot on some wide receivers. But what I would not include in roster clogger is rookies, because if they pop, just look at like Puka Nacua, Tank Dell. Of course, these don't happen all the time, but especially when they're cheap or they're first round wide receivers, then throwing them on the taxi squad spot I like to take those rookies still. I still like to have that upside. And even some year two guys, if I do believe in them and they have opportunity, I don't really believe in Jaden Higgins. So personally, I'd still consider him that. But I think you hit the nail on the head, though. If I'm not starting them and they're 25 plus years old, yeah, they shouldn't be on the team probably.
And just to be clear, we're cutting Jaden Higgins. We're trying to get some value for the players like that, but we are actively trying to get rid of them. And some players we're cutting that you might not expect to cut. I don't have a good name off the top of my head. Somewhere further down from Jaden Higgins, certainly.
Yes. I gave some advice to a friend of the show, Awesome Dumpling, where he has Jaden Higgins, Josh Downs, and some other wide receiver of the same type of ilk, where I told him, listen, you have a phenomenal roster. Can you package these three somewhat desirable guys for an actual starter? Can you send them for every single, like, Zay Flowers? Can you send them for Tyron Williams, Chase Brown, like everyone you can think of, right? That's probably worth north of a first, and all these guys are, in my opinion, worth seconds. So I think, like what David's saying, we're not trying to do nothing with them. We're adding them to our first to get a wide receiver that we think is worth north of a first, right? We're trying to get value for them in a move or just sell them for a second, honestly. I'm curious. Let's talk about cloggers. Can I throw out some names, guys? DK Metcalf, is he a roster clogger at this point?
I don't think so.
I think with his production last year, it was good enough. But yeah, he's approaching that range. He is approaching it.
Michael Pittman.
Somehow I knew you were going to say that. I think same answer for him. Slightly more optimistic, though, even.
Yeah, I still like Pittman. I think I could start him.
Clinton Johnson.
In reality, probably yes. I think with the new offensive coordinator that just loves speed, maybe we want to give it a game or two, but I don't have any shares to sell. I'd probably be trying to sell them. So, yeah.
Go ahead and answer for Trey Harris as well, Dave.
Yeah, probably on a deep roster. I might roster him, but if I can sell him for something meaningful, I think it's worthwhile.
Josh Downs, I'm curious about, as well as Alex Pierce. Where are we sitting with these guys?
Pierce just got paid, so no. And then Downs, I'm going to hold out hope one more season now that Pittman's gone, that he's going to be used in 12 personnel at least some of the time. Get those snaps up with two wide receiver sets, and then maybe you can be startable. He's a good player. So maybe that's why I'm holding out a little bit of hope for him.
I feel the same way. Have you ever seen Jaden Reed and Josh Downs in the same room? Man,
Yeah, it was a medical office, I think.
Jaden Reed was one of my other ones. So, JV, since you brought him up, go ahead and just tell me, is he a clogger at this point?
David, you probably agree with me. I think Josh Downs and Jaden Reed are just misused players with good efficiency stats that just have not had the opportunity to play outside. I want to believe in them. If you give me an early second, I'd probably trade him for that. So I don't think I consider them, but we're close to that line. What do you think, David?
Look, we're talking Packers here. This is finally the year. If this is the year that they do not consolidate their targets down to Golden, Watson, Reed, and Kraft, then I'm done drafting Packers skill position players in fantasy during the LaFleur era, because you have to, right? So we got to give Reed a little bit of a chance. Maybe he's the guy here. Maybe he's going to stay healthy. I've tried to sell him in a few spots for very little. He's certainly circling the drain.
Yeah, he might. It might be the right move. Justin, do you think he's a roster clogger? I feel like you're better at getting rid of these wide receivers.
Certainly, if I could even get like a 27-2-3 swap, I'm probably honestly willing to do that, unless I think it's I'm only moving up 4 or 5 picks, potentially late second, early third. And the last guy I want to ask, Christopher Godwin.
I think you can start him when he's healthy. He's old. He doesn't have much value. So, no.
Yeah, I don't think Jalen McMillan or Ted Hurst are that difference maker. So I still think Godwin is good. I think he's in that Michael Pittman bucket of, hey, if he's healthy, I think he's startable and could even put up like high-end wide receiver 3 numbers.
So I guess, how are we handling that range? They're not the guys you want to build around, right? But they're not the guys that are quite cloggers. What are we doing with that? What's your approach with that type or that trademark of wide receiver?
I've actually done this in some leagues. I've shopped around to try to just upgrade to somebody in the tier Jalen Waddle. If I can package 2 of those guys, maybe even like a 2-3 swap. Because Michael Wilson, I think, fits right in that bucket too. I've tried to trade specifically Michael Wilson and Matthew Golden for like guys in that range of Jalen Waddle. I haven't quite gotten it done, so I'm probably going to have to just add some draft capital to make it a little more intriguing. I think that's the best way to go. Otherwise, if you can get a running back like in a timeshare, like Justin, you've called out Rico Dowdle. I think somebody like that could be difference making if the starter goes down ahead of him, right? Who knows? He might even be the starter. I think players like that got a little more upside for the fantasy playoff push, that might be a better way to flip those guys and turn them into production that could actually be difference making.
Yeah, that's definitely a great answer. I'm going to go ahead and give a different one. Unfortunately, we've already missed this opportunity, but the absolute best time to get rid of roster cloggers is during the rookie draft. Just find some rookies you like better than them, start sending out the offer. You're going to get denied 6, 7, 8 times, whatever. Just keep sending it out till you get a yes. If people start thinking you're annoying, look, you're in the rookie draft, man. You're allowed to send out as many offers as you want as long as they're not horrible offers. So for me, that's when I like to get rid of my roster clogger receivers if I still have them. But also pairing them in deals, adding them in to get deals done, adding a draft pick to get an actual receiver that we like. Those are all terrific pieces of advice as well.
And actually, I read the Bill of Rights for fantasy football. You're allowed to send as many bad offers as you want to, David. So there's not really any limits there.
You might burn some bridges doing that too much.
Yeah, there could be consequences. All right, so we're going to move on from our kind of strategy talk to talking first and fallers second. So we all have a guy we're going to talk about.
Jalen Waddle, he's my tier riser. I think this is more course correction for us as a podcast than anything. We were a little low on him in Miami. We weren't sure he was going to get moved. That situation's a little murky, even with Malik Willis, who at the time we did our last tier video wasn't even going to be a Dolphin at that point. We thought maybe, but it certainly wasn't for sure. So he just had a lot up in the air, and we've never been huge on Jalen Waddle. I love this trade for him, though. I love this landing spot. Sean Payton's been looking for his guy there in Denver, his unique offensive weapon. It doesn't always have to be the same position. It doesn't always have to be the same set of skills. But when Sean Payton gets a unique offensive weapon, he really knows how to utilize them. I think Jalen Waddle's due for a big year. They spent a lot to get him, so they're going to have plans for him in the offense. I think he's clearly the best weapon for Bo Nix there, who's been pretty good, like at least for fantasy. I know whatever film guys might disagree with that statement, but fantasy's been pretty good, and I think adding Waddle's going to help him out. But I think it's probably the best quarterback play Waddle's had too. I know Tua was decent for a few years, but even Tua good wasn't anything special. So I think Waddle could be in for a few more big years. Now he's 27 and a half, almost 28 years old. Not long-term plans, but if you're competing, I'm okay offering a late 27 first. I don't love if it's my only first. I'm probably holding on to it just because 27 class is insane. I don't recommend trading your 27 first right now unless you get a great deal. But if you got a couple extra, someone's trying to sell Waddle, I'd send it out.
Yeah, I think Waddle has quite a bit of potential there. And if it's a late first, I never hate sending late firsts for wide receivers. I feel like I can start for a few years, but you hit the nail on the head there that the 27 first it's gold. We talk about that all the time. So the guy I'm going to be given also has a price of a late 27 first, not quite as young, and that is AJ Brown. So he'll be 29 years old before he's playing football. It's tough saying I'm probably going to get 2. I'm ecstatic if I get 3 years of production, high-end production out of this player. But I do think AJ Brown has wide receiver 1 overall in the range of outcomes. He's not my prediction to be wide receiver 1, but I think it's in his range of outcomes. I really do. He is that type of alpha guy. I know some people say he's lost a little bit of a step, but I do also think that if he's getting a 28 to 30% target share, that between his skill and his mouth, he's going to demand. He's got that potential to at least be a higher end wide receiver 1. Last year, he was the wide receiver 11 in points per game. Didn't feel like it. And the wide receiver 11 in total points. So I really think now that he's going to be the clear, undisputed guy with a quarterback that I think has a little more passing prowess, although I've been reading a lot of stuff telling me that I'm hating too much on Hurts. I've also watched that offense just stall out at times, and I didn't feel like I watched the Patriots offense do that same thing. So I'm very interested in buying 27 first. If I'm contending, if I just won a championship and I need another starter, I'm willing to move, or if I was just close to it, I'm willing to move my 27 first for AJ Brown. But I much prefer what you guys were talking about at the end there, to move a Chris Godwin and 2 seconds for AJ Brown, or Chris Godwin and a second and a third, something else. Not get that first. And if it's an early second, not throwing multiple seconds either, but willing to do the 27 first if I have to.
Yeah, we all know that AJ Brown is a phenomenal talent. So I think if he's at his peak powers and he's healthy, which I'm a little bit concerned about because there has been some stuff the last couple of years about his health. But we know that he's been one of the most dominant wide receivers, and Drake May looks awesome. So I do think in the range of outcomes is that Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen when they come together that huge year. I think that is in the cards, Justin. So I just want to make sure he is healthy for sure. But yeah, it's going to be exciting to see him with a quarterback like Drake May throwing to him. Now, my player that I'm going to be talking about as a tier riser is probably the wide receiver that I want to be the most overweight on in the whole market, and that's Lad McConkey. And I've always loved Lad, even going back to the rookie process. I loved Lad a lot. And I just think he's just one of the best route runners. His rookie year, it would look great. And then the sophomore year, the reception perception profile just shines a light on how good of a route runner he is. In his second year here, he had 88th percentile success rate versus man, 89th versus zone, 90th versus press. He's doing it all. It kind of stinks that Greg Roman offense limited him and used Keenan Allen a lot as well, which I went back and saw that Keenan Allen had the 12th most targets in the NFL last year. Shocking. But that's a big part of the Lad argument too, is the fact that huge target vacuum is now gone. I think Lad has got every tool that he needs to be a elite wide receiver because he's also very explosive. We've seen him rip off big plays. He wins downfield as a yak player. He's awesome. So I would not be surprised at all if he is this year's JSN. And this offense, I think, really could ascend. We saw when Mike McDaniel went to Miami at first, Tua in that passing offense was one of the best offenses in the league for a couple of seasons. He had that big of an impact when prior to that, Tua really was like, is he any good? I just think Mike McDaniel is awesome. And Justin Herbert, we already know is awesome. He got the one MVP vote. I think it was last year. It was the whole thing. But he's got MVP caliber season in him. And you pair that with Mike McDaniel. And also, I think part of the reason that Lad suffered too was because Keenan Allen, he was old and crusty to the point where I think he was only really operating short and somewhat intermediate. And the fact that both of their tackles were injured, Keenan Allen was that quick outlet. But Lad McConkey, he was having the intermediate deep, running all kinds of routes. So I think that really lended itself more towards Keenan Allen. If that offensive line's healthy now, and with Mike McDaniel there, I think that Lad could be in for a huge year. And one last point I wanted to make is Mike McDaniel, he's been first or second in the NFL since he's become a play caller, and the amount that he's used a fullback and efficiency stats go up for wide receivers when a fullback's on the field because when you're competing for targets with 3 wide receivers on the field, yards per route run inherently goes down. But when you have a blocking tight end, also they brought in Charlie Kolar and or a fullback. Those guys, they're not nearly as good of receiving options. So more targets do go to wide receivers in those circumstances as well, which we saw that with JSN last year. They ran more 2 tight end sets and they're just not as much of a threat to demand targets. So I think that I'm seeing a lot of parallels here that I just want to be high on Lad. I just traded for 3 shares of him within the last 2 weeks. So I'm a big Lad believer, and I just think that the upside is certainly there.
I have been involved in 2 trades involving Lad, but my shares have been a net 0. We discussed a trade last week, JP and I made with Lad, where I sent him Lad. I actually bought a share last week myself. The valuation, roughly Nico, maybe slightly under. I treated them as equal in the trade. Also a huge fan, definitely betting on him being more involved in 2 wide receiver sets. I did see a little thing about a hamstring injury recently, but it sounds very much like offseason precaution. So I'm not too worried about it, but definitely something to monitor if that starts popping up again. Maybe want to back off the exposure, certainly in redraft. Maybe want to be a little more cautious. But again, it just sounded like offseason precaution. Everybody has a little something going on when they want to sit out of practice in the summer. Not worried about that. Definitely still actively trying to buy some Lad myself. So love that call, JP. Going to transition here to some fallers. My tier faller kind of took the low-hanging fruit here. Travis Hunter. And look, I don't need to tell you guys why he's a tier faller, so I'm kind of going to use this as an opportunity to open the floor to another roster construction question. Look, the 3 of us included, a lot of people got caught holding the bag. They spent 102, 103, maybe 105, 106, something like that. Probably a top half of the first pick, though, on this player. Looks like he might not even play offense this year that much. So I'm going to answer first, but I want to know what you guys are doing when you have him and if there's any situations where you're trying to buy him. Me personally, where I have him, I haven't found an offer I'm remotely interested in yet. So I'm just kind of hanging on to him. If he's on a competitive team and he has a big week or two in a row, maybe I'm going to look to move him for a piece that can help me in season. But right now, I'm hanging on to him where I have him. As far as buying, that's a really interesting question because, like, I don't want to just send out low ball offers. I'm not that kind of guy. I'll send out if someone wants to trade me Travis Hunter for a third, reach out. I'm sure I'll do it. As far as a second goes, I think that's probably more fair market value. Even on a rebuilder, I don't think I can send a second. On a competitive team, I'm not trying to buy Hunter for anything. Where I'm really looking, though, on a rebuilder, can I send a Jaden Higgins? Can I send Isaac Tesla? Or what about maybe an aging veteran running back that's somehow still on my team, like a David Montgomery? Maybe I was competing and I'm trying to retool now or rebuild. Can I trade a David Montgomery or some other player that has value to someone, just not me? Can I get Travis Hunter on my team that way? Because the upside is real. We may never see it, and that's very realistic as well. But I can't use any real comfortable assets like a second round pick if I'm rebuilding. I'd much rather have the second. So curious how you guys are handling it, if it's any different, but I can't really buy him for anything real right now.
I'm pretty interested in adding if I can. In this past year's draft class, I probably would have been willing to move a 203, 204 for him pretty willingly. I definitely would be willing to throw out I don't expect it to make the playoffs 27 second for him if I'm got the assets to play with. If it's my only 27 second, I'm much less interested in doing that. But I really do think that he did flash in his last game. He tore his ACL in practice, right? He flashed. And I do think he's a phenomenal player, a phenomenal cornerback, and that could limit him, of course, right? That's obviously what they're saying. It's going to limit him because he's going to play both ways somewhat. But I just think that the upside still is there for this guy to, if it all hits, at 23 years old, 24, 25, be a probably late end second round startup pick at 25 if he does pull through and swing. And how many other players can you buy for a second that have the actual pedigree? And here's the other thing that I like about him versus a lot of other people in that position. I do feel like I will either get to the point where I know I can start him. I'm never going to be like, can I start Jaden Higgins this week? I'm going to just know, yes, I can start Travis Hunter eventually, or he's just going to continue riding my bench. So I don't mind him for those reasons. JP, before I go my guy, go ahead and answer kind of David's question on price point here that you'd be willing to if you even have any interest in acquiring.
Call it optimism, call it cope, but I'm still interested. I still just think the talent is there because, yeah, it's crowded, right? But it's crowded by a bunch of guys that it's like, how good are they really? Because Jacoby Myers, he's going to be entering year 30. Parker Washington, he just had a blip. It could just be a blip. It could be an ascension. We'll see. And BTJ, which one are we going to get? Is it year 1 or year 2? If it's year 2 for the next few years with maybe a little bit more, I guess, a little more positivity because there was something that didn't go his way, injury included. Look at it this way, right? So I think Parker Washington, with him being a free agent and Jacoby Myers potentially having fallout in his range, like I still think that even if he's just somewhat playing on offense this year, which I've seen people saying, oh, the snaps are going to remain the same on offense, but they're just going to increase it on defense. Like, we'll see. We don't know. But I just think that, honestly, I believe he's the most talented receiver in that room. And I think as the season goes on, I think it's going to be hard to keep him off the field. And if Myers does fall off, Parker Washington is gone, he could be the wide receiver too in the following year. Personally, for me, I've got a lot of people. I get trades like every other week of people trying to get Travis Hunter. There's still a lot of believers out there. So I agree with the guy's price, though. I think like an early to mid second. And on a rebuilder, honestly, I kind of want to take that shot because an early to mid second, what's the hit rate, anyways? And if he does hit, I think he's hitting really big.
Yeah, he definitely can hit real big. Definitely a faller. So all things considered, I regret taking him at the 102 in a few spots where I did for sure. My tier faller is going to be Garrett Wilson. Now, Garrett Wilson hasn't fallen a whole lot in tiers or startups, really. I think he's more a faller by staying in tier 5 is where we have him right here still, because a lot of guys around him, Lad, I think are risers for us, right? And then Olave, who was probably below Wilson last offseason, is above him. It's the Jets. Literally last week in our running back, when we had Brees Hall be a faller for being on the Jets, for having re-signed with them. Garrett Wilson now has a lot more competition. Omar Cooper, Kenyon Sadiq. And then when are we going to have quarterback figured out? We all know it's not Geno Smith. Geno Smith will be able to run a more coherent offense than we saw last year. And maybe Garrett Wilson will prove me wrong. I can tell you that Garrett Wilson with Geno Smith and not all of this additional like potential target competition, that maybe I'm overblowing the target competition. But then when you also look at the fact that he is going to be 26 going into this year, we know he's going to have a new quarterback next year at 27, and that quarterback's going to be a rookie. And that rookie quarterback now comes into his own year too. And Garrett Wilson is 28, and he's in the A.J. Brown type of age, right? A.J. Brown, late first, if he's doing well, value. If you can really get him for a late first in 27, I'm happy to throw that for him. But it's more where he's going in startups that I constantly see him like, I'm like, he belongs in the same tier as these other wide receivers, but he's going after all of them. And that's where he really is a faller. I think a lot of people are very off on the stink of him, and he's just not as a lot of teams say, I don't really believe in Wilson. I don't know that I want to buy him. So I think for the reason of production, flexibility, everything, I'm just down on him, but I don't mind him at a price that he's maybe trending towards.
Yeah, I think it's a great call out because I think he's going to be startable for the next few years, but I think the players going around him actually have difference making upside. And I just don't know that I see that for the next couple of years. I think the point you make about him having a rookie quarterback next year, more than likely, yeah, that's a big thing for me because they don't really produce high-end producers. And by the time that quarterback's in year 2, that's 3 years down the road. And he's going to be getting pretty old there. So yeah, I don't really see him increasing much in value, and maybe it's an opportunity to get out and just try to pivot to somebody else in the tier within or above, and I think that's a good recommendation. Now, my faller is DK Metcalf on the Steelers, and this is due in large part to the fact that he's gotten more target competition. Because you look on the screen here, last year he was wide receiver 23 in points per game. That's startable. It's nowhere near difference making. And I'm looking at the receiving leaders on the Steelers last year. DK Metcalf led the team with 850 receiving yards, which he did miss 2 games. But even points per game, we're looking at wide receiver 23. And then the next receiving leaders are Pat Freiermuth and Kenneth Gainwell, tied at 486 yards. He had nothing at the for competition at the wide receiver position, and he still was just a startable, okay starting option here. And I'm even looking at the passing team leaders, and it's not like the Steelers were terrible. They were 27 passing yards. I don't see that getting any better over the next couple of years either. And now you add in a legit option like Michael Pittman in there, who actually over the last 4 years, 3 of the last 4, he's been a pretty good producer. And now you add a second round wide receiver in Jeremy Bernard. Will he hit? I don't know, but I feel as if he was on the team last year, he would have been the second best receiver. So that's better competition right there. And now Rodgers is a year older. So going to be entering his age 29 season. He's going to turn 29 at the end of it. And he might not be startable. He's startable, but he's probably not your starter. So at that age, yeah, I'm not that interested in him. I'm not cutting him, but I'm trying to move him anywhere I have him.
Are you truly taking they made the playoffs as the 8 seed, 27 second? They were in the playoffs last year?
Yeah, I'll take any second for DK Metcalf.
Yeah, I think that's probably the correct move. It's hard for me to do because I was in on him last offseason, but I think that's probably good advice at this point with his age. Now we're going to move on to trades. We're going to be looking at all of these trades that we pulled from dynasty-daddy.com. Going to start out with big boy trades and go down to roster clogger trades. That's been what we've been doing with all the positions, and this is definitely a big boy trade. I don't know if this is the wide receiver one. I have to imagine JSN is the wide receiver one. I know it's personal preference, him or Puka for some people, but one of them has no character issues. And you're not tearing down too far from JSN. You're going to Malik Neighbors, who's typically a back end of the first pick, but has all these potential coming off of the injury, extra surgery concerns. you're getting an extra 27 first on the neighbor side with this 1-2 swap. So it's Malik Neighbors and a 27 first or JSN and a 27 second. David, I feel like you're typically the one who wants the absolute most for a hammer out of us when you're selling. So which side are you taking here?
Yeah, this one depends on two things for me. First, how far apart are these picks? If we assume they're the same person or roughly going to be a round apart, that definitely means more than if they're a few picks apart. And then am I competing? If I'm competing, it's really hard to sell JSN and pick up Malik Neighbors not knowing what you're going to get. Is he going to start on the pup? Is he going to be himself this year? So look, long term, the value's on the Neighbor side for sure in this one, I think, because I do believe Neighbors is going to come back, and I think he's the same level of player as JSN. Who knows if he'll ever have that kind of season, but he'll at least be in that neighborhood, no pun intended. So give me the first. But if I'm competing, man, it's so hard to pivot off one of my true core hammers for a guy that I just can't trust this season. So unless that's an early first and a late second, in which case, yeah, I'm doing it no matter what, just because I want that early first, and that's as valuable as Neighbors and Jason if it ends up as Jeremiah. But assuming it's a reasonable distance between those, not something extreme, it's going to depend on if I'm competing or not.
Yeah, I think you broke it down pretty well there. If it's an early first, then definitely go to the Neighbors side. But if it's random or playoff, I'm contending. I'm taking the JSN side. I don't trust Malik Neighbors this year. I really don't. And I think that trust and potential slow start of a season and maybe just being rusty is going to make him lose value because of it too. So if I'm rebuilding, I'm definitely willing to shed the points of that Malik Neighbors could be letting me to. So yeah, I don't really have many more thoughts on what you said other than that.
Nothing really to add from me either. Let's move on to the next trade here. T-Mac and a 27 first for Justin Jefferson, Jettas, and 227 fourths. Basically what I talked about at the beginning. So I think we've kind of talked through it. David, go ahead, just reiterate your main points from earlier.
Yeah, actually, I snuck this one in there because I sent out an inbox offer of my Jefferson for Tet in my first back in a league. I just kind of wanted to gauge the waters on this one. Look, again, like we talked about at the top of the show, it's hard to move off Jefferson if you're competing and get a guy like Tet because the ceiling is just not the same. Of course, it depends on where that first is, assuming it's not an early first, because if it's an early first, that really changes things. I think it's a coin flip. I think there's validity to both sides. The reason I sent it out on the team I sent it out, I'm a little bit thin. I could use an extra piece, and I've got some extra hammer. I've got some other hammers than Jefferson. So I think my top end point scoring weeks are still going to be up there. But if I need a hammer, I'm happy to package Tet in the first for Jefferson on the other side of that. I think this is a fair trade, personally.
I'm taking the T-Mac side every time, I think. I just think if these wide receivers, if any of them have the wide receiver 2 season, Ted's pretty much going to hold value. Jefferson's going to tumble. If they either one of them have a wide receiver 2 overall season, Ted's dynasty wide receiver like 2, and Jefferson just remains in value.
So do you think Tet can actually have a wide receiver 2 overall season, though?
Maybe on the back.
I do think that Tet does have a top 5 wide receiver season in his range of outcomes. I understand our concerns about Bryce Young throwing the ball to him and what that might mean, but he's learning an NFL game last year and he still was phenomenal. And he did it from a fantasy standpoint pretty well, right? I'm not betting him in redraft. I'm not drafting him as a top 5 wide receiver, but he's not a top 10 dynasty wide receiver for me because he's young. He's a top 10 dynasty wide receiver for me because I think he has multiple wide receiver 1 years in him and not one overall in his next 5 years, and has best outcome wide receiver 1 possible.
Do you know who scored more points last year?
Okay, do you know who's going to score more points next year? Probably. Look, I brought it up for a reason. So you guys are both on the Tet side then. Help me finish this. If it doesn't go through, how much are you willing to add? Let's ignore the fourths. Fourths don't mean anything. What are you willing to add? Give me some player names, value range, something like that. Like mid-second, late second, or is it less than a second? Like, I don't know. I certainly can't add an early second.
I would say a second round pick that I expect to be a round later than this first, within 2 picks, right? If it's a mid second, then I want it to be a mid first, right? If it's a mid first, I want it to be a mid second. If it's an early first, definitely I'm willing to add an early second to it. Same if it's a late first, late second, I think as well.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, Justin. If it's going to be an early first, I might even add 2 seconds to it.
I mean, if it's going to be an early first, I might add a late first to it. So
I was thinking of saying that, but yeah. All right. So next trade here gonna be Bowers or Judkins and Igbuka.
yeah, we kind of talked about this, right? Can you pivot from one of your high end wide receivers to a Bowers? We're talking about someone on the back half of their prime, but this is a similar situation where we're trying to use a wide receiver to access an elite asset in Bowers. Now you need something to pair with it, whether that be a 27 first, which is really attractive, or a player like Quinshon Judkins, who open market probably worth a little bit more than a random 27 first in most people's eyes. We're in a start 10 league here, 1 point tight end premium. I think I'm taking Bowers and running. I think probably I'd want more for Bowers than this. So pretty much no matter the situation, I think I'm going to take Bowers here.
Yeah, I've said previously, I think Bowers is going to smash this year. And yeah, you making the point of being start 10, that makes me lean that way even more with the full tight end premium. Yeah, it's really hard to get those elite tight ends too. I've tried to pry Bowers in every single league, and people will not budge on him because you either got the elite guys or you don't. So people don't want to move off them. So yeah, I'm taking Bowers.
I'll be honest with you. This is almost something I would consider in a non-tight end premium start 10. I think I'm probably close to leading the package. It's pretty close, but yeah, in tight end premium, pretty easily the Bauer side as well. Next trade we have here, straight up, we'll call this truly random. 27 first or Devonta Smith. This is in a start 10 where we're somewhere between needing depth and wanting hammers. I think this is, in a normal year, this is the range where we're saying, yeah, it's probably just about there, but these 27 picks are gold. Can either of you guys spend a random at this point? 27 first could miss the playoffs.
I think if I'm a super team kind of thing, like maybe I would, but I just think in general, I'm gonna say no because Devontae Smith is gonna turn 28 this year, and kind of what we talked about at the top of the show. Like I just think he's got to be a big producer to really remain in value. And with Jalen Hurts, I think Devontae Smith is awesome, but with Jalen Hurts, I don't know that I quite see that ceiling there for Devontae Smith. So I just think that you're going to be much happier next year to be having the 27 first asset over Devontae Smith. So I'm going to take that side.
Yeah, if it's truly random, you're telling me there's actually a decent chance it misses the playoffs. I got to keep the first here. Now, if it's in that same bucket we were talking about with A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle, I'm spending a probably mid-late first. I guess this might be a more interesting question. Of those three, Jalen Waddle, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, who do you prefer in that group? Honestly, I might pick Devonta Smith. I think they're all fair. I think A.J. Brown is probably going to be your guys' pick, at least Justin's. But I see the upside for Smith. He's a little bit younger, not much. But yeah, if we put those three in a bucket, you guys leaning Smith or Brown, or what are we doing?
I think I might take in order them Smith, Brown, Waddle, but I wouldn't take Smith over Brown 10 times out of 10. I'd probably take him over Brown 6 times out of 10.
Yeah, I think I'm just looking at the upside. I just don't think from a value perspective, I don't think Devontae Smith could be worth more than a 27 first. So I think it's hard for me to not take the 27 first, but I agree with the order.
All right, so I'm going to agree here as well. If it's a late 27 first, I might consider it differently. I think JP just brought up the really great point of I want that 27 first on my roster next year. Can I pick up something else? Can I go ahead and can I buy Devontae Adams for a second and start him and keep my 27 first if I really need a starter at this point? Next trade here, Luther Burden or DJ Moore at a 27 first. Interesting. Two teammates last year. Will DJ Moore bounce back in that new situation? Is this like a potential process trade where you might actually get more production out of Moore than you do out of Burden and you pick up a first this year? I would think that's the way that betting markets really are viewing it. People love them some Burden, but there's a narrative there. Either of you guys taking the Moore side here?
It's a theme to this group. Depends on where that first is. I think if it's random, I'm at least considering it. If there's a decent chance it's a non-playoff first, I think it's a smash on that side. If it's most likely a mid-late first, I kind of think you still got to stick with Burden. But DJ Moore is not a bad guy to tear down to in a process trade from Burden. I think we're kind of selling high here in this situation is what we're assuming, is what we're hoping. So I don't know. It just depends on the first again.
I think if you guys notice, it's actually 12 team, start 12. I meant to say start 12. So I was already actually thinking of the 27 first and DJ Moore. I actually made a trade similar to that. I traded Burden for 27 first and Parker Washington. I just think that as much as I love Burden, like there is a little bit of risk. Like he was a second round pick, and there are some concerns, and that offense is a little bit loaded. So I would take the DJ Moore and 27 first side probably 9 times out of 10 if we're calling that first random.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad play there. We love Josh Allen. We don't really love anything else that he's throwing to. Can DJ Moore recapture some of that magic? If he does, it's a smash that the 27 first side is a win. Even if he's just a replacement level player and that 27 first is random, I think it's still probably a pretty reasonable deal there. I think I'm going to go with that side as well if I have to pick, even if it was only a start 11. Next trade, 2 seconds in 27 and 28 or Parker Washington. This one is, I could not click accept on those seconds fast enough if I got this. I would have dropped my phone trying to click it too quick. Either of you guys disagree here?
No, and I kind of figured that would be our consensus, but also I think this is happening for Parker Washington. If you're bullish on him, this is probably a fair price to spend on him. I don't like betting on small sample sizes like Parker Washington. For that reason, I'm definitely taking the seconds.
I agree. And I've always been a little bit of a Parker Washington guy because I think there's something there. I've rostered him too long in some leagues, but he was the 185th overall pick in the NFL draft. And like you said, David, it was a small sample size when BTJ was hurt, Travis Hunter was hurt. I think even Strange was hurt too. Let's chill out a little bit on the Parker Washington.
I love whether it's Wilson we mentioned at the beginning of this episode or Washington. I love trying to capitalize on selling them, but I do think that the fantasy community is wise on it, right? Occasionally you'll see guys taking them way too early in a startup draft, but for the most part, like I do think that this is about the cap, right? We're not really able to add a second to them to get to a 27 first because those are gold, right? Or I haven't at least personally really seen that with those two guys. So I think this is the take the money and run. And yeah, I'm very interested, like David said, in betting against the guys who had a small sample size. Next trade we have Jaden Higgins or Michael Penix Jr. This is interesting. It's pushing our process of is it enough value? We're getting a player who's maybe worth a second. We said we'd take any second probably for this Higgins type of wide receiver, right?
Yes, yeah, and also it's start 10, and I don't think there's a good chance that Jaden Higgins is never a starter for me, and I'm not a huge believer. So super flex league here, 2 quarterback. I'm not a big Michael Penix fan. In a listener league, I was just trashing on him, but I'm still going to take the Michael Penix side because if he's starting, I can start him. If Jaden Higgins is starting, I honestly am not sure if I can start him.
Yeah, I think this is a good example of how to get out of a player like this while still getting some value. Look, like it or not, whether none of us are huge Penix fans, none of us have ever been huge Penix fans. The Falcons drafted him with a ton of draft capital. His competition, I know I've shat on two a couple times already this episode. I'm going to do it again. He's not that great. Yeah, he's got some accuracy, and Stefanski is going to love that. But I think when Penix is healthy, he's going to be clearly the guy there. So whether it's to start the season or midway through the season, I expect Penix to start most of the games there. I'd much rather have a low-end starting quarterback than Jaden Higgins. So that one's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, I agree as well. Think it's a great way to get out of it. Take any player that you feel like is worth about the same amount as that wide receiver that is a running back or quarterback. Just a good way to, if you can't get the pick, get a position that we think has more likely to actually fit our roster construction. Here's an interesting one. Romeo Doubs or Brenton Strange. This is a 1.5 tight end premium. Start 10. I think I definitely lean Strange here pretty handily. I think Dobbs probably is a roster clogger wide receiver in New England, but he's new there. He could be a boat. He could even be the wide receiver 1 there, guys. It's not impossible. Either of you guys have a different opinion?
Look, the best time to get out of Romeo Doubs is when he signed that extension. The second best time is now. Give me something I can start. Look, he was never startable even for the Packers when he was their main X receiver, and that was his role. I don't know if he's even going to be the main guy there. There's several other players that do what he does well. Matt Collins, Keishon Butte, they're not going to get no snaps. If I can get something remotely startable or valuable for Romeo Doubs, Brenton Strange, a third, heck, I'd probably take a fourth. I know that might be selling low, but give me a fourth on a roster spot for Romeo Doubs. That sounds pretty attractive.
Yeah, I inquired about him on a best ball league because, and you guys know, because he's been on the trade block like every month for 2 years, and the guy won't take anything less than a second. So that's crazy to me. But yeah, he's probably just a roster clogger. In best ball, maybe I'll take Dobbs, but and this is start 10, and kind of what I said with Jaden Higgins, like I don't know if I could really start him, but Brandon Strange, which I am a little bit nervous that they drafted Kosio and Borkature, but also Brandon Strange is a free agent this year, so he's got some incentive, and also if they see a future with those tight ends, then he can go somewhere else and still be a good tight end.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
One thing that we really should have mentioned at the top that we didn't, this roster clogger talk is very specific to lineup leagues. In best ball, we have a very different approach. I kind of wish we would have thought about talking about it there, but you want these roster clogger receivers because they have a chance of having spike weeks and you don't have to guess when they're going to happen. So just real quick, wanted to make that distinction because I think it is important.
Yeah, we'll pin a comment down below for sure. Next trade we got, is it the last trade?
Yep.
All right, that is our last trade then. I wanted to do more. It's so much fun talking trades, guys. Well, don't worry, we'll get to do some tight end trades in our episode next week. Feel free to let us know where you disagreed with us on anything. Feel free to let us know any questions you'd like us to talk about in the tight end episode, any players you want to see included in our trade talks. Feel free to submit a trade question you have involving players. We'll make our own little graphic instead of stealing it from dynastydaddy.com if you want us to do that as well. Would love some interaction. Love hearing from you guys in the audience. So thank you for joining us for another episode of the Dyno Construction Podcast. We hope you found this as helpful for you as it was for us. Please remember to like and subscribe wherever you listen or view. And from all of us here at the Dyno Construction Podcast, until next time.